Uh, for people who don't know Linda, and I'm sure everybody does, she was one of the pioneers in this research, really, and it's currently a postdoc and co-leader of the RadiGame project in Frankfurt, and official title Radicalization on Gaming Platforms and Messenger Services at the Peace Research Institute. She's a founding member also of AGRN, the Extremism and Gaming Research Network that we are all familiar with, and focuses on extremist activities as well as efforts to prevent and counter extremism in digital gaming spaces. The floor is yours, Linda. Thank you very much, and thanks once again to helping us with the survey.
Thank you, Maya, for the kind introduction, and hello, everyone. Today I'm going to give you a brief insight into some of the findings from the RadiGame project. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because I think you've heard it multiple times today already. So the types of different extremist activities that occur in gaming spaces. I think, propaganda games, but also in-game content, gaming platforms, all that kind of stuff that you talk about as well in the GEMS project. Important to note is that the RadiGame project, the proposal was written in 2022. And at that point, we had surveys with gamers that suggested the prevalence of identity-based hate and extremism in gaming contexts is quite high, right? From the ADL and with the UNOCT study that was mentioned, etc. And that many were exposed without explicitly searching for this. But we only had a handful of empirical studies at that point. So our goal for this project was kind of to say, okay, how can we improve the evidence base of what people are seeing on gaming platforms specifically? So the RadiGame project is a German consortium project funded by the Federal Ministry of Research, Technology and Space. You can see we're all over Germany. It's partners from academia, PCVE, tech, and the police. And we have three pillars. One is extremist content and radicalization, one is prevention and intervention, and one is risk assessment and law enforcement. I work mainly in the first two, and today I'm going to give you a glimpse into pillar one and what we found on gaming platforms. So first, what did we do? Between 2023 and 2025, we collected over 3,000 data points. So that is both posts as well as profiles via keyword searches and snowball sampling. So the moment we identified, for example, a relevant group, we then looked at the members and then looked at their profiles. Or when we found a post that was particularly relevant, we then went ahead and looked at what did this person post in other parts of the forums. We decided to focus on four platforms specifically. There are a lot of gaming and gaming adjacent platforms, of course, but we focused on Steam, Roblox, ModDB, and Game Banana specifically. Steam is a game distribution platform. On Roblox, you can build your own games. And ModDB and Game Banana are modding forums where people share and discuss the modifications they make to commercial video games. We chose these platforms in part for their relevance. We did an exploration in the first step to see where could we even locate content, but also for their searchability. There were some gaming platforms like Guilded that have no search bar. So that's really difficult for our methodology. So this is why we chose these four platforms. We only looked at openly accessible content, so public content, no closed groups, no closed chats, just what we could locate via normal keyword searches in German, English, and Arabic. The focus was right-wing extremism, Islamism, anti-Semitism, and racism. So these were the kind of keyword or the areas for the keywords that we looked at. And we wanted to find both identity-based hate and extremism. We're using the German definition of extremism. That's important in an international context like this because the German definition is quite broad. We basically call anything that's anti-democratic or anti-constitutional extremism. That means that in Germany, identity-based hate is often automatically seen also as extremism because it's anti-constitutional. That's just as a backdrop to sort of what you're going to see in a moment. You may, in your national context, not recognize this as extremism, but the Germans do. and both speech and acts are included in this, although we were only looking at speech, of course. What did we look at? Profiles. So avatars, descriptions, profile art, digital accessories. On Roblox, you can design your own shirts, for example. Then sort of group names, user interactions, but also sort of general forum discussions. Um, to a lesser extent, we looked at playable content, even though we looked at mod forums and Roblox, where you can also share your games, because we simply didn't have the time to go into all these games and play them and look at the play experience of it. So we mostly focused on the description, reviews, comments on the mods, and things like that. And the main research question was what type of extremist content is shared in digital gaming spaces? How do users interact with that content? And also, how do they interact with each other when it comes to that kind of content? I brought you some illustrative examples from our data set, so from Roblox. And you can see usernames that are clearly using, denying the Holocaust, 6 million lies, using Adolf Hitler references. You cannot name yourself Adolf Hitler on the platform. It's automatically moderated, but people circumvent misspellings and things like that. We also see some of the t-shirts that we found, including the ISIS logo on the side. There were also anti-Semitic t-shirts, t-shirts of right-wing extremist bands, all that kind of stuff. We found a lot of groups too. So NPD is a German neo-Nazi party. And there was a whole group on Roblox just calling itself NPD. The I mean, you can title exactly that, you don't need to know any codes to these types of experiences and understand what they are propagating. We also have some examples from ModDB. Again, ModDB is a modding platform. It's a bit all over the place in terms of the design. So I'm going to start on the left upper screenshot. This is a screenshot from a ModDB profile, and you can, with one glance, you can see someone put a lot of effort into design, making it like a real right-wing extremist profile. Another person called themselves SS Panzerkommandant. We see a lot of Germanized names on these platforms that are glorifying NS socialism. Below SS Panzerkommandant is one of the mods that we found. Stellaris is a game, and here someone put up a mod where they removed all non-white characters. That's why they call it European phenotype. Just below, Waffen-SS Skin Pack. A skin pack means that there's a modification for your avatars and how they look, what they dress, for example. And so someone called Hauptmann Heinrich, again, the Germanized names, put out a mod where you can dress up your characters as Waffen-SS. In the middle, we see something that was just posted in a forum. It's kind of like a self-made meme where there's an overlap between sort of anti-Semitism and left-wing extremism. The devil is a Jew and his children are communist Jews. So someone who is both anti-Semitic and anti-left, anti-communism, whatever you want to call it. We saw that a lot. So mixed and unclear ideology profiles that espouse both jihadism and right-wing extremism, for example, or that make these wild mixtures of content. And then on the bottom left, this is a screenshot from one of the modifications, an Hezbollah modification that was widely shared on the platform. So different types of content on all platforms. I included this because I think this is important in terms of the tone that we have in some of these spaces. So you see a meme that was shared. Hitler asks Anne Frank, "How's your homework, Anne?" And she said, "This problem is so difficult." And he says, "You need more concentration." Haha. And then people comment in the same kind of cynical, dark humor kind of tone. To be honest, when I read homework problem, I instantly expected a final solution pun. Someone else says, haha, that'd be so crude. You need to find die Endlösung der Judenfrage, and here, I'll help. And the third person says, I'm sorry, but that isn't the right answer. We see that a lot in terms of just the tone in these spaces. Playful, dark humor, but definitely also reproducing certain hateful language, hateful stereotypes, and of course, making fun of a Holocaust victim. Interpretation of the findings that we have. So first of all, what can we not say based on the data that we found? We found it impossible to judge whether a user is radicalized based on their online profile. You just saw the meme and sort of the comments. People just post for the lulz, to provoke, to troll. We don't really know. Or is that genuine ideological identification? It's just very difficult for us to base that on their profile. So that's why in all of our publications, we do not make any point about how many people are radicalized or is a certain user radicalized. We just look at the discursive level, if you want. So these kinds of ideas are shared, they're normalized, but we don't know the intention of the person sharing them, and we also don't know sort of the impact of it. The other question is sort of, is there strategic exploitation by designated extremist groups, or is this just individual users sort of self-directing, making that kind of content? We can't really tell from our data. We spoke to some experts. We did an interview study as well, and they said it's probably both. But to decide in a single case what it is, basically impossible if you're just looking at the online profile or the online piece of content that you have. So we can't really answer that kind of question. We found a lot of hateful content just by using these kind of keyword searches. Nobody was hiding this kind of content. Everything I showed you was out in the open. But the amount of hateful content does not equal its impact. So we can't really say, oh, people are radicalizing in these spaces because they're seeing this content. This is just not a conclusion that we can draw from what we have. And very important, and we also always say that, this is not the average user experience, right? The average user does not go and search for all these keyword search terms to find extremist material. We go looking for that stuff, but it is sort of in a very minority in terms of, when you compare it to how many posts there are on ModDB or on Roblox, etc., on average. What can we say from our data? So we see that there's a relevant number of users that perform, to sort of use the title of this conference, that perform toxicity and hate on these platforms. Again, we don't know the reason. That's why performance is maybe a very good word. But it's very clear that there are these users, and some of them are putting a lot of effort into that, into their profiles, into these self-created experiences. In order to make a really good mod, you need to spend hours and hours coding. So we don't know why they're doing it, but we do know that this is very elaborate and it takes a lot of time. So clearly this must mean something, even if we don't know what exactly. We also see that extremist themes and narratives do not really differ considerably from other digital spaces. So there is no special variant of extremism that you only find in gaming spaces. This is all just sort of, it might take a different form if it's a mod or a Roblox experience, but basically it's the same narratives that we find elsewhere. This content was relatively easy to locate and openly accessible, so this can tell us something possibly about the risk of exposure at least, right? Yes, we went looking for this, but you could also stumble upon some of this stuff in the open forums because that's where we found it as well. And as I said before, we're always talking about sort of the potential impact on the discursive level. Is there a normalization or at least a toleration of this kind of communication in the spaces that we were looking at? And last point on sort of the interpretation, we found a lot more right-wing extremism and anti-Semitism than we found jihadist content. This is something that is already established in the literature, and we replicated that for the platforms that we were looking at. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone here. That doesn't mean that jihadis are not using these platforms. It might mean that they are using sort of the closed groups that we didn't look at. Or it might be that they are hiding their content very well, so we can't locate it via keyword searches. But for us, for our data set, it's very clear right-wing extremism and anti-Semitism are the most prominent. To sort of send you off some implications and directions for future research, we were very surprised that there is very little research on gaming platforms in general, like especially user interactions. There are some studies looking at sort of Steam reviews, but that's not really, helpful for what we were trying to look at, which is user interactions and how do they interact with each other and the content. So to establish a baseline for extremism research, we would need some more information and some more studies on sort of gaming platforms in general and how do people interact there? What kind of social space are we looking at here? And only then can we adequately judge what is maybe different or similar in terms of extremist content being shared. We also don't know how users stumble upon that content. Are there certain topics that are particular trigger points for extremist content, or is this just kind of random? It's by chance. We don't know. That'd be something interesting to look at. Then different performances of hate. This is not something that we coded, but we could, of course, look into sort of the framing, in-group, out-group, differences among type of extremism, not just in terms of the content and the narratives, of course, but in terms of the performance. And what impact do we have, right? What impact do we have on radicalization processes, on the normalization of hate, on political discourses, especially on a platform like Roblox, where you have a lot of minors who are being partially socialized into political discourses on these platforms. What does that mean for these kids, essentially? And then also something that's very dear to my heart is how can we use gaming platforms positively, right? We're talking about the risks and we're talking about all the awful content that we found, but these are great social spaces and we could tap into that. We could use that to prevent extremism, and we need some more work on that, on how we could do that authentically and not like the game that Josh showed earlier. And with that, I thank you for your attention and I give back to Maya.